Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical applications of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, executive and life coach Meredith Oak, with a quick reminder that podcasts are conversations, not consultations. But if you're looking for one of those, do check out our free practitioner directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. So it's fairly well accepted that light affects our mental health. And we know this through the decades of research that we have on seasonal affective disorder and how people are buying light boxes to try and correct that. But the connection between light and mental health goes so much deeper than we even realize. Like it's not just about that period in the winter where we get the winter blues because we haven't had enough sunlight and are overexposed to toxic light. It's actually something that's going on all the time at a really deep and profound level. And our guest today is someone who really understands that. Dr. Kelli Ritter is back on the podcast, and we got into a discussion about voltage and anxiety. And I love talking about anxiety because it's one of those mental phenomenon that seems to affect pretty much everybody, right? From children all the way on up. And it seems to be increasing. And Kelli has a very unique take on why we're all so anxious and what we can do about it. You know, we've all heard about the mind-body connection, but what I love about Kelli's work is that she operates from the quantum level. So she actually is like, well, it's all one thing. It's, you know, even to say separate out mind and body might not be the most effective way to look at things. So I'm super excited to have Kelli back. Kelli has PhD in counseling and worked in academia teaching for many years before starting up her own practice, where she now mentors coaches and has courses that combine food, mood, mental health, trauma treatment, and everything through a quantum biologic perspective. Her work is always evolving and is always fascinating, and I just love talking to her. So here is Kelli. Oh, and Kelli also has a podcast called the Nourished Soul Podcast. So if you enjoy this, I really, really recommend subscribing to Kelli's podcast as well. If you like this one, you'll love hers. And so without further ado, here is Dr. Kelli Ritter. Enjoy. Hi, Kelli. Welcome back to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. I'm very excited to talk to you again.
Thank you for having me, Meredith. I'm always excited to talk to you. So we'll see. We'll see where we go.
All right, we'll see what happens. If anyone hasn't listened to my first interview with Kelli, highly recommend. We got into some really cool stuff, and we're just sort of going to pick it up from there. So Kelli, your background is in mental health, and then you added nutrition and wellness. You have a really very well-rounded, full approach to helping people heal. And one thing I hear you talk about a lot is this concept of voltage. So
Mhm.
could you explain sort of to those of us who are not quantum biologists, could you explain what you mean by voltage and why it matters?
Yeah, well, I'm not a quantum biologist either, but when I started realizing all the things that I've trained in, when I tell you I've done every training you can do, all the trauma trainings, all the things, and they were helpful, but I always felt like I was missing something. And
Hmm.
even when I found nutrition, I was like, this is it. It's the gut health. We've been missing gut health. And then it still would only get people so far, definitely improving.
Hmm.
But in my own life, when I started the quantum health practices and the whole, applied quantum biology, but even before that, really just with Sunrise, I started
Yeah.
realizing that if you can do all the talk therapy, you can do all the different kinds of therapy, but if you are not working on your battery, the literal battery that is your body, if you don't have the right inputs, you are going to be running on a low voltage. And I kept realizing that a lot of the mental health stuff that we see, particularly around
Mm.
mood and anxiety and chronic stress and even chronic fatigue, These
Yeah.
are signs of a low voltage, that we don't have the right inputs. We're lost energy, essentially. We're losing energy faster than we're putting it in. And you and I have had a couple of conversations, I think, about how much energy it takes to heal. And so when you're in you're trying all these different things to heal, and you're
Mhm.
working on your nutrition, and you're doing all the things that people tell you to do. That's great. I think that's helpful, but it is never going to fix your voltage. Well, I mean, some of it might by accident
Right.
do some helping of your mitochondria, but what I'm talking about is supporting the mitochondria so that we make the water and the energy, but particularly that water that becomes the battery in that is your body. And if it is depleted, then you are going to have symptoms. That's what your body is going to say to you, "Hey, I don't have the inputs that I need. You're spending more than we're making." And so that's what I mean by low voltage. We are going to get
Right.
symptoms. And I just never looked at anxiety that way. I looked at it as communication from
Mhm.
the body. I got that stress is a natural response, that we want that when we're in danger. We just don't want all that danger signaling constantly. And I had worked a lot, all these different modalities that help nourish the nervous system, but it never clicked until I came to the applied quantum biology, when I started with the collective and saying, oh, it's because of this. We are electric beings.
Right.
I kind of got everything was frequency. I'd heard that.
Mhm.
Yeah, everything's energy, everything's frequency, but it all started connecting when I realized all the danger signaling. And what really nourishes the nervous system is safety signaling. And no matter what therapies you're doing, if you still aren't attending to your circadian rhythms and your mitochondria, you're going to have low voltage. You're not going to have the right inputs that you need to function optimally. But certainly, I mean, even just chronic stress and chronic anxiety, it's never going to be cured completely from all those other therapies.
Right.
I know
This is
that.
no, this is so interesting because I think that's sort of one of the core principles of applied quantum biology, right? Like if you come into this world and you're like, okay, I'm in, I'm, you know, I'm going to operate as though this is the way things work. Seeing the body as a battery
Correct.
that
Yeah.
requires a certain type of environment to be properly charged is kind of a core concept. So let's talk about that in a couple of ways. So there's the the environment that we need to put ourselves in to keep that battery charged. And then there's the effects uh, of that. So I think it's interesting because yeah, we think about frequency and vibration. We tend to really put all of that onto our mood or our feelings or our thoughts and how we're doing. But if we take it into the physical for a second, it's like, no, we're talking about how much of a charge we have to do stuff.
Mhm.
That's what we're talking about with frequency from starting at the basic level.
Right,
Yeah.
really basic, and it's so simple, but there are you think, well, it can't be all related to that. It's like it really is all related to that because it really does come back to inflammation. And if you're like, okay, well, you can do all these things to try and help reduce your inflammation, and yet if you don't have the right environment, the right inputs, right, you're just going to have more lost electrons, lost energy,
Lost energy.
and not realizing what's happening because you're doing all the things. But even
Yeah.
some of the things, that some of the things actually are wasting more energy or taking more,
Right.
as opposed to actually putting more in.
Yes.
So you do these extreme things and you're trying to do the exercising and the cold plunging and all the cool things that all the cool kids are doing, and it's actually putting more stress, which could be good if you are actually to a place where you've nourished your nervous system,
Right.
your mitochondria, your hormones are optimized, everything's working really well, and now you're using those as tools to help you. But if you're
Right. So you need like sufficient voltage for those things
correct,
to be effective.
yes,
Okay, there's so many things I want to ask. I do want to start though with a quick recap. And yes, I talk about this on 90% of the podcast. We're going to talk about light and darkness for a minute, and I'm going to talk about it every time because until
it's the
people
best.
think about light the way they think about drinking water or eating vegetables,
Yeah.
till it's that common of a thought, I'm going to keep talking about it. So, Kelly, like just give us a quick recap of, a kind of an ideal lifestyle to support being sufficiently charged.
Okay. I love this subject. You know, I love the light. The light is all about, I'm all about the light. But what's really, I just want to say before we go into just sort of more of a protocol, like what's
Mm-hmm.
ideal in terms of by light, particularly for mental, well, for everything, but I'll just stick to my lane and say mental health and mood. I don't think there's anything more important in health, like there's some other things that are important in life, but when we're talking about health, then honing, tuning in, understanding the light inside of us. We are like, I
Mm,
kept thinking that kind of spiritually, oh, we're light. Yeah, we're light. I did not really, it all of a sudden it sort of clicked for me when I got here into applied quantum biology and going, the light inside of us is influenced by the light outside of us. And so our light environment, when I ask that question on, my intake, and people are like, I don't know what you mean by light environment. I mean, literally, whether you're inside or outside, what's going on with your light? And so light informs life, light shapes life, and we have light inside of us that our mitochondria make infrared. And there isn't anything more healing than that, I don't think. And then honing that light, tuning into that and nurturing that light. I would even say
right. That
knowing.
is a beautiful point, is we're not just talking about yeah, like we're not dead zones that are just out there absorbing the light. Like we have light inside of us. Our body makes light, our cells make light,
Yeah.
and our moods and our thoughts contribute. But all of that is happening. So it's like, how are we nourishing the inner light that already exists that we create? It's an exchange, not a one-way street. I love that.
Right. So yes, the way
Beautiful point, Kelly. Thank you.
well, I think it hit me, and I'll tell you a little story in a minute because I think you'll appreciate it and other people might. But it just really hit me that that is the point, is the light. And I was really focused on the light outside of me, like making
Hmm.
sure I get outside, taking breaks outside, cracking the window when you're driving, when you're at work, wherever you can get natural light, get the natural light starting with that early morning light because it is so helpful. It's got all that red, so it's anti-inflammatory. It starts your day, all of the cascade of effects that that has in the body. So packing up the melatonin, bringing on the cortisol, like, and people think cortisol stress. I'm like, no, no, cortisol is good at the right
Mm,
time and the right
yeah,
amount because that's what gives us our get up and go. Our
right.
like energy.
That nice gentle
Yeah.
cascade. That's not, yeah.
Right, but if you don't if so I just try to get people I haven't given up on the whole sunrise thing, I'm
Hmm.
always talking about getting out at sunrise, but just if you can just get natural light, whatever time you get up, go outside, get some natural light, crack a window, open a door, even if it's just for a minute, get natural light before you touch a screen, before you start turning on all the lights in the house or whatever you do. Now, I know a lot of people get up in the dark because they have to get up for work and it's dark.
Hmm.
So that's where we start talking about the mitigating the blue light. But we're not just focused on just the light bulbs and just, cracking windows. You start to, what happens, I think, is that your body starts to crave it. You start to recognize that it's your body knows what to do with the information from the real light outside. So everything starts to work better in the body. Hormones start to become optimized. Everything starts working better. Your mood is better, digestion is better, and you didn't realize that it's just from the light and then blocking the artificial blue light and staying out of that as much as you can, especially after sunset. But this is the practical stuff, is like literally being in harmony with your natural environment as much as you can, because we all still live modern day lives. So I don't want to
Yeah.
be dogmatic about it, but if you can get light and a little bit of food and then screens in the
Yes.
morning, that alone is huge.
Yes. That's going to shift and give
Yeah.
our body those replenishing signals, start our charging, start our hormones, start everything, as opposed to being in a constant state of depletion.
Right. And we're talking about the battery, the body. Like, what is the light, water, magnetism? When we're talking about these things, what does the body need? What are these inputs? Light is a natural light. So, sunlight
Hmm.
is key. It's one of the oxygen, sunlight, and then electrons. Right. But the light is really the piece that I think people just don't respect, or I don't
Yeah.
know. We just don't, I don't know. We don't
It's
get it.
interesting.
Oh, we get it.
It's been such a block, right? Like you would think like I did a presentation recently and I put a bunch of slides of like what light bulbs looked even in like the 90s, right? Like
Yeah,
not that long
80s,
ago.
90s. Right,
Yeah,
right.
like light bulbs, screens, street lights, headlights on cars, like all, we looked you know,
Mm.
laptops, tablets, iPhones, all these different things. Like the light our light environment has changed so dramatically. And it's like, I mean, there are people who are mad about it. Don't get me wrong. There's, but we didn't really think about it as an input. We're just, and so we're still at the point, I think, when you say it to most people, it's like, oh, well, your light matters. It's like, what?
Right,
What do you
right.
mean?
Why does that matter? And so I think, for me, I just started with getting out around sunrise just because I had heard that that was good for you. So even if you don't understand that that's actually that the light has frequency, that's
Hmm.
information that's actually informing your body about what time it is and what season you're in and what you need to be doing, what a body needs to be doing at that time. Even if you don't get the science part, just try it. Just try it. That's,
Yeah.
it's
Because
feel differently.
we can't recharge, we can't have sufficient voltage
Right.
if we're in toxic light all the time. If we don't have that natural light input, it
Yes.
is basically impossible for our bodies to
Exactly.
charge up.
To charge up, we're not docking properly,
Right.
right? Like
It's
you
like
dock
when
it
you
for
clean out the
yourself.
goldfish bowl and you scoop out the little goldfish and it's like flopping, 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 and then you put it back in the water. It's like, like those are our cells.
I love that metaphor.
Those are our cells when we're in the
Right.
toxic light environments and we go outside and it's like,
We're back where
you
we
can
need.
breathe.
Oh, I love, love, love that. Yes, that's right. And and I think, so what does an ideal day look like? You asked me that. It's outside as much as possible, but it's also that shift in understanding that we're electrical beings
Yes.
first. And that also we are nature, we are a part of nature. So this whole idea that we're so separated from it. And I was somebody who, not that I'm a crunchy, like I'm not super outdoorsy. So if you're somebody that's like, I gotta do what? Literally just be outside. But I was also outside a lot, but not touching earth. And so
Mhm.
now when I added the earthing practice of actually physically touching skin to earth, either a tree, a leaf, my feet on the ground, however I can do that, that really, I mean, I can literally feel it in my nervous system. So, yeah, the
Yeah.
light was helping a lot. And then adding that piece was, I could just feel it almost immediately. It's virtually instantaneous that you're absorbing those electrons. So we need the light, the electrons, and then oxygen. So breathing through your nose, like stop breathing in and out through your mouth all the time. And that those three little things, huge. And people just don't realize that their mood and
Mhm.
their chronic stress is because they don't they are low voltage, their battery isn't charged.
Right. Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit more.
Okay.
So so our bodies, we're electrical beings. Our the structured water in our body is like a battery. It needs the light to charge.
Mhm.
Um, and so if we don't do that, obviously we're going to experience fatigue. But let's tie it to anxiety, because that's what you do that so well and so beautifully. And I know you see people in your practice for this, right? It's like, okay, so I get, like, if I don't have the right light, I can't charge my battery.
Mm.
But why is that giving me anxiety? Explain that.
Right. Well, I think of anxiety, it's not necessarily bad to have anxiousness. It's
Mhm.
like stress. There's eustress, as in EU stress, not like
Mhm.
you stress.
Okay.
So eustress is what we think of as kind of motivating. So anxiousness can be sort of similar in terms of if you've got something really exciting going on, you may feel a little anxious about that because you want it to go well and it can be motivating. And so the sensations in the body, that usually passes, that's normal, that's fine. It's when, and even when we have an acute situation, when our
Mhm.
body experiences a threat, our body goes into the sympathetic state, like the body saying, "Oh, there's a threat. Let's get ready." Well, what happens is that even if there's no real threat, if there's an imaginary threat, but also when our bodies are not charged, we get into that chronic state of fight, flight, sympathetic stress state. And and all that danger signaling is going on a cellular level. And so that's
Mm.
what I think is happening with chronic anxiety.
Mm.
It's almost synonymous, but it's what I would call insecure anxiety is rather than like secure anxiety where you're
Right.
able to meet it and utilize that kind of anxiousness to kind of propel you forward. You get
Yeah.
stuck. So our system gets stuck in that fight or flight, and then we just have this perpetual anxiety. Either some people, it's just kind of a low level. And you and I have talked about this too. A lot of people aren't aware of it because they've lived
Yeah.
with it for so long that they have no idea how anxious they actually are on a regular
Yeah.
basis. They kind of know something doesn't feel right. They feel wired and tired, but they use a lot of substances like sugar and carbohydrates, not just drugs and alcohol, all kinds of caffeine to try and manage the day. And they can
Mhm.
usually, a lot of people with anxiety are ambitious. They tend to be a little overthinking kind of people, but they want things to go well. They want to do a
Mhm.
good job in their life and at home and at work. And so they're the kind of people that don't even notice
Yeah.
that they're anxious because I think we even tie it to the ambitiousness. Like if we weren't anxious, we maybe wouldn't be as productive or as effective. So that's what I see a lot of. And it's
Right.
just chronically in that fight, flight, stress response. And over time, it just becomes this chronic anxiety that just becomes part of your life. And then when you reverse it, and so sometimes people start having like panic attacks or they're crashing, or then
Mm.
they end up in depression. They have an episode of
Right.
depression because their body's
Because
like,
there's only so much a system can
I,
take before
exactly.
it
The
gives out.
body, that's right. The body says, no more. We don't have the inputs. We are exhausted. You are in danger signaling constantly. And and so that's what happened. And then people are like, "Oh, I should probably get some help." Um,
Yeah, right.
right?
We gotta fall off
Um,
a cliff first. I don't know what you're talking about. That's never been me.
I know, I know. So trying
That's
to reach
often me.
people, right,
Yeah.
it's before that happens. Like, that's why I created the course,
Mhm.
Quantum Stress Management. It's circadian health, it's
Yes.
mitochondria, and I also included nutrition because, I love that, but that's the meat
Mhm.
of the course.
Yeah.
And I created it so that you could get through it in a day, because I don't I don't do the drip thing very well.
Yeah.
I have to do weeks of it, probably fall off. So I tried to really think about what would be the most helpful and the people that I see. So if you recognize that something feels off and that you do really feel wired and tired and you are using caffeine and sugar and carbohydrates and alcohol and things
Mhm.
just to like manage or popping more Lexapro. I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, I'll just take an extra Lexapro today. I'm like, or you could go outside
Right.
or you could put your hand on a tree and and they would rather pop a Lexapro. Um,
Right.
right? But if you learn this stuff when you're not in crisis and you start practicing, so this is what happened to me, right? I've done everything. I thought I was pretty good. And then I came to quantum biology to try and help my son, not thinking that I needed it because I was good mostly.
Yeah.
Even though I know I've struggled with anxiety, I'm one of those people that, well, my family, this is the joke, right? That I can make a picnic a stressful event because I'm like that. And I have a grandmother. I had a grandmother that would go all the time. She'd make that
Yeah.
weird noise
Yeah.
because she's so anxious all the
Yeah.
time.
Like,
So I
"Oh, I'm
come
just
home.
gonna go out for a walk and get a" Oh, you are? Really? Yeah, I know what you
I
mean.
should just walk
Exactly
around
what you mean. Yeah.
all the time. She was so anxious. So I come by that pretty naturally. And I didn't even so I started using all the quantum strategies that we learned,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I got really serious about my light environment, but blocking the blue light at night. I wasn't great about that before I started studying, right? So I got really, really clear about all those things. The most stressful time in my entire life, and I've been through some stressful stuff, and I could not believe how resilient, how stress resilient
Mm.
I was. And you know this because I've told you, but I would wake up and I was like, I cannot believe that I'm like, woohoo, to get up. I felt so clear, so grounded, so like my sleep was actually restorative,
Mhm.
not just I was a hard sleeper. So I thought I was getting pretty good sleep. I didn't realize how much stress and anxiety and other stuff started coming up. 2,
Yes.
once you start healing and your nervous system
Yes.
starts to feel safer and you have more safety signaling going on, then old stuff will come up. Grief, stuff. Which
Mhm.
is also what comes up is good. So realizing how much more connected you are to your natural environment, it feels like you're more, for me, it feels like I am more connected and aligned to my soul than ever
Yeah.
before. And I never, during that time, I didn't know what the day was going to look like. Um, and I ended up taking a bit of a sabbatical because I never
Mhm.
knew exactly what the day was going to bring.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had what I needed. I had the voltage to handle the things that were coming. And I'm telling you, I mean, I've done EMDR, brain-based hypnotherapy. I've done all the tools, all the tapping,
Mhm.
EFT, all the, healed my gut for years. And never did and I would not have really even noticed, I don't think, if I hadn't been in the most stressful situation I've ever been in. I'm not
Right.
sure I would have totally recognized how stress resilient these these strategies help you become. And so, of course, I was like, I have to share this with people. We have to find a way for people before, hopefully, before you're in really stressful situations. But even if you're in the middle of it, if you just start practicing some of this stuff, you're going to feel better. It's going
Yes.
it's going to help your nervous system and nourish your nervous system in a way that yoga never did for me. um,
Yeah.
As
No,
much as
me
I love
either.
yoga, I mean, I was already a non-drinking yogi, like, healthy eater,
Yeah.
like, come on, non-smoker,
Yes.
like, hadn't
All
had
the
caffeine
things.
in years, like, all the things. So,
Right.
mhm. Did I even answer your question? I kinda went off there.
Yeah. No, for sure. Because I think it's so interesting to think about, okay, going outside more often and sleeping in a totally dark room and
Mhm.
like dimming the lights in the evening
Mhm.
is going to help me feel less anxious, right? Like it doesn't like we're so compartmentalized, I think, in the way we think about things. It just seems counterintuitive, but it actually makes so much sense if those practices are like are helping our cells are helping us feel safe on a cellular level,
That's right.
then of course the
Yeah.
anxiety will be less. Like I know what you mean because I get anxiety now and I'm like, oh, what's that about? And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, I have a deadline coming up and there's 6 things I haven't done yet. Right? Like, oh, thanks, anxiety, right? Like for sure. But that chronic just
That's right.
living there
That's the difference.
is
So the
different.
anxiety, yeah, and then you have this different relationship with your body so that when something like an anxious feeling comes up, you're like, "Oh, what's the message?" Like, is this secure anxiousness because I have things that or is this more what I would call like distress or like insecure anxiety? Like there's something else going on for me, or is this low
Yeah.
voltage? Like, do I really just
Right.
need to plug my body on the earth and get outside for the light?
Right.
Right.
And then all of those trauma practices you were referring to, which I have also done,
Right.
EMDR and the tapping, right? Those are more effective when
Mhm.
we have sufficient voltage.
Yes. And you know what also I figured out? I knew that those were psychosensory tools that we had.
Mhm.
Got it. I knew that it was helping our brain and our system. It's sending signals. I knew that it was frequency related. I didn't quite understand that it's chemical. I mean, it's chemical stuff that's happening. It's the electric that I think makes it work so quickly. But if you are
Mm.
at a low voltage state,
Yeah.
so if you don't have the battery isn't charged, those are that signaling, and you and I've talked about this too, like the signaling isn't going to move well, it moves pretty quickly. But I think the reason that those tools are more helpful is because of the quantum communication,
Mm.
quantum communication superhighway. So if that quantum communication superhighway, the fascia isn't hydrated, if we're not hydrated on a cellular level, if we're depleted, then the communication, there will be places that are kind of stuck or it won't be
Right. It's gonna be
smooth.
patchy
It's going to be patchy. That's the best word.
or glitchy. Yeah.
It's glitchy.
Because right.
Exactly. So sometimes that tool can be really helpful, but I think it's helpful because of frequency. It's helpful
Right.
because it is electric. It's electrical and chemical, but it's the electric that I think we tend to focus on the chemical part a lot
Mhm.
in mental health.
Yep.
And even like metabolism, like people are getting a clue, but not enough of a clue to realize it's all about frequency and the electric
Right. And all the chemical stuff is
later,
downstream of that.
downstream. Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So we gotta get our voltage
Gotta get
s
our voltage.
in order for
Such a good
any of this stuff to work.
right, that's why it will be minimally it might be helpful in improving some things,
Mhm.
but it's not going to move the needle nearly as well as it would if your battery was charged, and I think the people who have a lot of benefit from some of these things just sort of happen, like, they're actually barefoot a lot, they're happening
Yes.
outside a lot, they're into gardening,
Yes.
like, they already have some things that are helping their battery.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's why too, like, looking back,
Yeah,
um, you can see like, I can see times where, like, oh, I felt a little bit better as I moved out of a high rise and into a house, and I was walking in the backyard, and I was going outside more often, but I didn't know, right? And until we understand, then we might we may as just as easily stop doing those things and be like, "Oh, I feel awful again. I don't know why."
right.
It's like
To make that
understanding.
yeah, to make that connection. And I have to share this with you before
Mhm.
I forget, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think you'll appreciate it, but, so a little context, I have always, always been interested in the soul, like, where is the soul? What is the soul? That's why I created the Nurse Soul podcast, so we could have conversations about the soul thing. I for as long as that I can remember, I've always wanted to be aligned with what I call soul, like source, or just feel like I was in alignment with my true big S self, right? I have been doing everything you can imagine since my early 20s to try and feel that alignment.
Mm.
And one of my favorite songs of all time is Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel. And what I like about that song is like I've always been into some woo stuff that you don't tell your friend. Like my friends would think I was a nut, part of that
Yep.
song, right?
Yep.
The part that really has always, and sing it at the top of my lungs every time I hear it. The part that where he says, "You can keep my things, they've come to take me home." I've always felt like, "Oh, I can't wait for that day." And I'll be like, "You can keep my shit. They've come to
Yeah.
take me home." And I always felt like that would be I don't know what I thought that would be like. So I'm driving a couple of days ago. I'm driving, and that song is on my playlist, and I'm listening to that song. And yes, I still listen to my playlist because I still listen to my playlist, because I really love my music. So I'm listening to the song, I'm singing at the top of my lungs, and I keep thinking about the Quantum Biology Collective and how my friends would think I was a nut. My life was in a rut, but now I've got this information. I was like, "Oh, this is kind of a quantum-y song." And then it gets to the part that I love, and all of a sudden I got super teary because I could feel for the first time probably ever, like I am home. I don't you can still keep my shit because I am home. Like, I feel so much more in alignment with who I really am, and it is all from being in harmony with my natural environment, and it's the quantum health practices. That's the only thing that's different in my life.
Wow.
And so I just wanted to say if there are people listening that are, like, on the fence about, "Do I really wanna go down this rabbit hole?" I would say go
Wow.
down the rabbit hole because I don't know anything better than this.
Wow.
And truly the mitochondria, what came after that thought, after I got, like, teary and I was like, "This is
Mhm.
amazing, I have to tell Meredith," when I talked to her on Friday. I felt like we have you've lived in multiple countries, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes when you're in that country, you don't necessarily know the rules or, like,
Yep.
what like, the driving rules and the stuff,
Yep.
and oh, yeah, right, you don't know. We have the map for health. Like mitochondria, I don't care where you are and where I don't care where you are, you have the rules. You know, you have the playbook to live an aligned, healthy life, no matter what else is going on. And I was like, that's amazing that we know how to play the game because
Yeah.
we have the rules. And I never felt like that. In all of my training in mental health, I always felt like we were missing something.
Yeah.
The way we looked at mental health, I was like, I don't think that's what that is, but okay.
Okay.
Yeah, like
Right.
all the
And
treatment team meetings, and I was like, I don't know. Yeah.
wow.
Mhm.
And that makes so much sense because when we're connected to the earth, it's like we're finally allowing on that subatomic level, be like, I belong here.
Yeah. And I
I am a
always
part of this.
that's right. And I was always coming at it from more of an intellectual mind place.
Yeah.
And
Same.
I really do it really and I was so close, right? Like, I was into heart math and coherence.
Mhm.
I was like, "That's it, it's about coherence," but I didn't quite connect the voltage part. I didn't quite understand that we need to have our battery charged in order to fully benefit from that coherence, that
Yes.
connection that we all crave. I don't know anybody that doesn't crave that
Mhm.
kind of alignment, that kind of connection, and it's
Yeah.
not really a
There's yeah.
mind thing. It's
It's not no, it's not. I love the mind. I'm a super
I do
mental
like
verbal person, but it's
mhm.
yeah, it needs to know its place and
Yeah.
not it
Mhm.
can't always be the driver. And that's been a huge piece for me as well, right? Is like yeah, just allowing my physical being to feel connected.
Mhm. Yeah. And I don't think the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are really in competition of like which is more important, or I think
Yeah.
it obviously it all works together. But I believe that there's something beyond that, that you've got thoughts, you've got feelings,
Mhm.
you've got behaviors, but there's some space, something beyond that that is
Yes.
actually driving all of that. And
Yes.
you know what I mean, speaking of the Heart Math Institute, there's studies that have been replicated all over the world where so they've got people all hooked up to these different monitors, and then they have images that are randomly put on the screen, and they just click a button and then this image comes up, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes it's a bunny and it's soft and it's something happy, and sometimes it's a traumatic like a car crash or something. The heart, and then what's interesting is the heart rate variability goes down when it's going to be a scary scene. Not even no one knows what the image is going to be. The
So the field responds before the person's even seen the image.
correct. The field is responding, preparing the body. So to think that we're not in tune with that field
Mhm.
all the time. So, and what happens is that the field informs, the heart gets it first. The heart responds by
Mhm.
lowering our heart rate variable or increasing it. What doing the like preparing the body, then it goes to the mind, then it goes to the body. So I think a lot of like CBT and cognitive behavioral therapy has all been about the brain informing the feeling, but there's
Mhm.
something happening before that.
Yeah.
So the field is informing the heart before the brain even gets involved, and then the body responds. So the sensations in the body are, and it's very quick. And
Mhm.
we know from a quantum perspective, it's just, the quantum communication is so fast.
Yes.
I think we can get bogged down on do thoughts create the feelings or the feelings
Yeah.
aren't there or what. There's a field, and
Yeah.
and I think when our batteries are charged and when we're more in tune, we sense that and we can,
Right.
right? And we're more in coherence.
Yeah, that was gonna be my thought or my question, right? It's yeah, so back to the voltage,
Yeah.
back to the our theme of voltage, the
Yes.
the more voltage we have, the clearer our communication with that field below
Mhm.
the level of thought, so then we don't have to work as hard to organize our thoughts
Right.
because
And
that there is a the information bubbling up is gonna be more coherent co because we have better voltage, because we're communicating with the field in a
right.
clearer way.
Yeah, and just from a really practical standpoint, when people are stressed and anxious, and so many people feel confused all the time,
Mhm,
and they're confused about we live in a world where we're constantly bombarded with all kinds of influencers and information. So the confusion lifts when you are connected to you and that light and the light inside of you, and you're not no longer so confused when there's coherence. You're more, and
yes,
I would call that the frequency of love, the frequency of healing. You're in coherence with that frequency. You're not going to be so brain foggy and confused all the time, or even
right.
part of the time. People might
Yes,
not that way all the time, but a lot of the time.
yes,
And so
and it
whatever.
diminishes, and then once you notice
Yes.
that clarity, it's like, "Oh, that's nice. That feels that feels a little better, like, let's move a little more toward that," and seek out those times of day where we don't have so many inputs, right? Like and I think different people have different stamina for it, but I need some time where like, the phone has to be far like, it has to not even be where I can see it because I know there's stuff in there. I just need that clarity, and going outside brings
And
that.
yeah. And I think even though we are all a little bit different, which is really fun, and even playing with circadian rhythms and different people, and seeing when eating, that seems to be nuanced, like what time
Hmm.
of day we eat is pretty general, but the light does not seem to be nuanced.
Yes, that's
That's
interesting. Yeah.
very consistent. So when we socialize and how much time we need alone and whether we eat with people or not, like all of that seems to be very nuanced and individual, but not the light.
Yeah.
We
The
all
light is universal. We all need the light, like a fish needs the water.
That's right. That's right.
Right. And it's interesting. I did an interview with someone who does human design
Oh, yeah.
recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I love to.
yeah, they very interesting philosophy. And what came out of that is I that some people their feelings inform their thoughts, and some people it's more the other way around, depending which of their centers are open or closed, which I thought was interesting, right? Because some people are so sure it's one or the other. I'm like, oh, because it is for them,
For them.
for them.
We're saying
But
there's a
for someone else, the
exactly.
feeling
Yeah.
precedes the thought, and for some people, it's the thought that triggers the feeling, depending how they're
Right.
set
But
up.
what you and I have just said is there's a field that's informing the heart first anyway. So what
Yeah,
difference does it make? And if
yeah,
you're tapped into that, which you're already a part of, that that field is already we're already a
yeah,
part of that. You're either
yeah.
in tune with it, you're aware of it, and you're being informed by it consciously or unconsciously.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors are all yeah, those are part of our higher functions as humans, but still lower functions as divine
Compared.
beings.
Right.
That
Exactly. Exactly, but I do like human design because I like, and even with circadian rhythms, I've found that there are certain people that even though I would say eat your last meal before sunset, like you and
Mhm,
I would be like, yes, that makes, there are some people that really like right around sunset. I think it has more to do with safety, the feeling of
mm,
safety when the
yeah,
family is home and they have so we work on the kind of trauma responses and the safety just to see, but I think
right.
there are some people that right around sunset seems to be a good time for them to eat.
Hmm,
Um, yeah, so I try not to get too stuck on, but
yes,
I'm always a real stickler about the light. So
yeah. So, yes, back to where we started, light, 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 I'm not gonna shut
like,
up.
yeah,
No, it's not everything, but it is the foundation.
yeah. And I used to say light shapes life. I think light, water, magnetism all inform and shape life, but I just think the light is um it's just so crucial.
Right.
And I wish more people would look at that in terms of mental health.
Yes. It's coming. I mean, the research is all there, and that's yeah, I mean, we talk about that every time too, right? And, like, I think that's what is challenging for people. It's like, "Oh, if that was true, if that was irrefutable if there was irrefutable evidence for that, then we would know. People would tell us." I'm like, "Well, they're not."
Yeah. Yeah,
Except
both
Kelly
of
on
them.
my podcast.
Well, and you
Well,
and I,
and lots of podcasts now. And your
which is
podcast, there's lots of places to hear about this. Yeah.
which is great. And you and I have had like the man on on light on our podcasts. So Dr.
Dr.
Moreed
Moore, yes.
Moreed is super like frank about the fact that all the scientists that are studying circadian rhythms and light, they all know, but
Yep.
there's it hasn't been translated,
Yes.
right? So
And they've
it's
known for a while, like 20
right,
plus years.
right.
Like they know that toxic light. I mean, and if you're not someone who's motivated by feeling better, then maybe be motivated by the fact that there
Is
is a
disease.
quantifiable mechanism between toxic light and cancer and Alzheimer's and obesity and
Uh,
diabetes.
and I would say thyroid too. Like we know there's
Yep.
good evidence that blue light is creating hypothyroidism. So yeah, we all think, and this is what's, oh, sorry, I know we've got to probably go, but people will say, "Oh, but it's my genetic." Like I say, my I had a grandmother that was super anxious
Mhm.
all the time. Maybe it just runs in my family. No, I think low voltage runs in the family. And I think
Yeah.
mitochondria is passed down from your, we could argue whether that's mom or dad, but mostly in the research, it shows that it's on your mom's side. But whatever mitochondria you got, like we can improve that. That's
Yes.
what's amazing is that you can even get to the point where you're making new healthy mitochondria, regardless
Yes.
of what you were given. I'm
Yeah,
like
and that's
all about
another
that.
thing we're just starting to really wrap our heads around. It's like, okay, even if it is genetic, it's epigenetic, right? Like
Mhm.
our choices can change whatever is going on for the better.
Yes. Turn off and turn on. Yep. Those genes. So yeah, that's really exciting. But I do think it's it's a process. You and I had a
Yeah.
process. Everybody
Yep.
else is gonna have a process. It's yeah.
Yeah, and just like start where you are. If you need support, go get it. And then the trauma lifts a little and you're like, um, I have enough motivation to go outside now. You go
That's right.
outside, it starts making you
Mhm.
feel a little bit better, work a little bit more on the other stuff. And yeah, and I love what you're saying earlier too. It's a journey, right? And to remember that like sometimes taking a step in the right direction means we might have to deal with some things that have been waiting for their moment.
Right. When your nervous
And
system is like, "Oh, we're safe. Hey, there's some grief you've been hanging on to for
yeah.
20 years. How about we work through that?" I'm like, "What?" But you're more able to handle that because you've got the energy and the voltage. Your body won't lie to
Yes.
you, and your body knows, like, "Oh, hey, we have the energy for this now." Now your mind might be like, "No, we don't.
No, thank you.
No, thank you." But
I
yeah,
need to go read Twitter. That's what my
exactly.
mind does. It's like,
Let me
"What?
go numb.
Your
Yeah.
daughter's graduating high school and leaving home? What's on Twitter today? Who's mad?" Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I will just report that the youngest son, the reason that I came to the Quantum Biology Collective is doing really, really well.
Oh,
We still have a ways.
Kelly.
I think he's got,
Yeah.
we're all on our own journey, but it's just very
Yeah.
exciting to see. And
I'm
I
so
heard
glad
this
to hear.
noise and I was like, what is that? And he was cold plunging in our pool. He was going, oh, 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 and I was like, really not Wim Hof breathing, but that'll work.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, we could go on for another hour about, yeah, how it affects the family and
Oh, I
all the
know.
things. I know. I was at a school concert last night, and I was wearing, I've compromised with my children. I'll wear yellow glasses. They're like, we can't go out in public with you with those orange ones. So I wear the yellow ones and a hat.
Yeah, all wrapped up. I go in the orange and everybody so many people lately have been like groovy glasses. Like I don't know what they think. Um, but
I know. Yeah. Who knows? I know. But people, I don't, yeah, they're not quite as weirded out as they used to be. They're like, all right, whatever. Everyone's doing something these days.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
Kelly, thank you so much for being here. I loved this voltage conversation. It really, like, it was really clarifying in a lot of ways.
Oh,
And
good.
connecting back the importance of voltage to our mental health and our trauma healing. And,
Mm,
it's yeah, there's just so much in there. This extends so far out.
right. Yeah, it's an exciting time.
It is. We're lucky to be alive right now. There's all the things are happening.
Yeah, yeah. But thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. We'll do it again soon.
Mhm.
Okay. Bye, Kelly. So, since Kelly and I had this conversation, Kelly has released a new 21-day quantum stress reset that I just wanted to quickly tell you about. If anything resonated in this conversation, the anxiety that we all feel, even if it's low level, there are some simple strategies that can be addressed. And Kelly has created a very beautiful multidisciplinary approach to this with a quantum foundation. So if you listen to this and you thought, yes, I really would like some relief from this chronic anxiety that seems to come and go of its own free will and be sometimes connected to life and sometimes just shows up out of the blue, I recommend checking out Kelly's Quantum Stress Management 21-day reset. So there is a link in the show notes. Um, to go to that course. And I think it could be life changing, especially if it's, you're not, in the depths of despair. It's just that like kind of gnawing chronic, like, can I just feel okay for one day would be really nice, right? Like, I think that a lot of um, mental health interventions are focused on people who are in a really bad place, which is, they need that and it's good. But there are a lot of us who are in an in between place where we're not depressed, we don't have an anxiety disorder, but there really could be probably a nice improvement in our ability to feel extended periods of calm or extended periods of contentment or well being. And there's so many different ways that our environment is making that difficult. And once we know about them, we stop feeling like it's our fault and like we're doing things wrong and like, what's wrong with us? I have this nice life. Why don't I feel better? So if that resonates, please do check out Kelly's course, link in the show notes. Have a wonderful week. Take care. Bye bye.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.